We start with one of those wins, Caro. Brad Scott at Essendon. It was a fantastic win. It was a statement. They are on top of the ladder tonight. But there is some dramas around the football department in the background that continue to fester and perhaps overshadow the win a little bit. More on that in a moment. Let's hear from Brad pre-game when he talked about the unusual situation with his head of football and his head of recruiting not being on speaking terms.
I think there's a carryover from the lack of stability in the past, and unfortunately when you need to make a cultural shift, you can't just click your fingers and get it done instantly. So there are still things that we need to work on, but let's be honest, I wouldn't be standing here right now if everything was perfect. There are wounds that haven't completely healed over a long period of time at Essendon. The club has craved stability for a long time, and that's priority number one for us.
Brad also did an interview with Jake Nile in the Sunday Age where he made some pretty big statements too. I would dispute that Adrian Dodoro and Josh Marnie are not on speaking terms. I mean, they got together and re-signed Peter Wright last week, but there is no doubt in my mind that the administration at Essendon is like a ticking time bomb. And I'm not exaggerating here. I think people are angry. I think they're upset, they're emotional, they're frustrated, and the bosses at the football club have done nothing to alleviate the situation. From little things like James Jarvis, the opposition analyst who was removed from Adrian Dodoro's list management department a few weeks ago and put into footy because there was some acrimony there. Bigger things like the revelation last week by Sam McClure that Josh Marnie has in effect really been sidelined and Adrian Dodoro is no longer reporting to him but reporting to the CEO, Craig Vozzo. Craig Vozzo was brought in to be a tough football CEO and in my view he's shirked the biggest issue facing the club and he's done so too late. I mean, Brad Scott came to this club in October, Matthew, and we were all led to believe that big changes were going to be made. I mean, for heaven's sake, the Josh Marnie review, agree with it or not, criticised the list management and the recruiting. The list manager and recruiter is still there. He was filthy and his supporters were filthy at the time about what was done. They're all still there. And my understanding is that even things were said to Brad Scott that were going to happen that haven't happened. And that, to me, was very clear in that interview.
Who are you suggesting is upset here, though? Who are you talking about? Are you talking about Josh Marnie in this situation? Who else would be upset at this
I think there is a level of frustration and nervousness and emotion, high emotion from most of the key players at the football club at the moment.
Give me who are the key players?
Well, I don't think Adrian Dodoro is happy. He's unhappy that we keep talking about him, but he would...
The coach would like it resolved.
I'm sure, but you listen to that interview, Matthew. I mean, what Brad's got unresolved issues, long-standing... and he keeps talking about cultural fixing.
What I'll say is, do you reckon Melbourne were travelling that well? When they, under Simon Goodwin, when they get to the end of the year and Simon's being questioned and, you know what, they went on and did some special things. So there is an opportunity.
Melbourne in 2018, Matthew, you had a situation where I think it was Brendan McCartney and Todd Viney. I mean, remember all that we found out that they weren't speaking. They made a preliminary final. It was all washed away. What happened in 2019? Melbourne disappeared for a year. This needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed now. And it's crazy to me that we're talking about it in March. You need to change your list management in December.
When you say ticking time bomb, that's a strong
Someone's
statement.
Going to.
What happens when it goes off?
There's going to be a victim in this, and in my historic experience, I find it hard to see both Dodoro and Marnie keeping their roles, but certainly one of them has to go. You've got, I mean, they don't like this match committee thing coming up, and I think it was reported last week that he was no longer on match committee, Adrian Dodoro. I don't think he was ever on match committee, but certainly match committee was held in his room. Mark Harvey,
he would go though,
who runs a coterie group, had an office near the coach. There was discomfort about all those issues, the old guard v the new guard.
I've asked those questions today of those guys, and they'll say that, you know, and it's a different coaching structure, so in a sense. So they'll do whatever is needed from the football club. So if someone, they'll suggest that this didn't happen, which Caro's obviously speaks to some people, I'll speak to others, that didn't happen at all. And Mark Harvey is one of the
What do they suggest didn't happen?
That they weren't asked by Brad, that they were asked by Brad Scott to not come to committee meetings.
I'm not suggesting that happened. I'm suggesting that they used to come in occasionally to match committee and now they don't.
And in terms of that, like Adrian Dodoro selected these players. So often he'd be asked by people, what's your opinion on this player? Would you play him in this role? Would you play him in that role? Mark Harvey is not even on the coaching panel. in the soft cap, so he'll often be there.
But he runs one of the
representing
coteries that had far too big a
I
say.
admire your loyalty.
That doesn't happen at professional football clubs anymore, man.
That's incredibly loyal, but that's illogical.
Why is that?
Adrian Dodoro's got no role in picking the team.
Yeah, I think
If Ben,
no role.
No, he didn't. You're
No, but
saying.
this has been a 25-year thing of him being on
Hutchie,
benches and in match committees.
You're
He's got
saying
no role in that
Are
room.
you saying he picked the team, though?
No, you just said he was asked his opinion on players.
Yeah, so what does he do if he's asked
in a
his
match
opinion?
committee sense? That's illogical.
No, but if
His job is done,
So you
surely
do
it is.
everything the same as the next radio station, do you?
Adrian has been overtly involved in that footy program for too long.
So you're saying Adrian should go?
Yep. Yep. I said that 6 months ago. And I think he's a great servant to footy, and there'd be...
But how staggering that the
role
new
somewhere else,
boss
but-
and the chairman have somehow put in this compromise in place. I mean, remember when Grant Thomas and Rod Butters weren't speaking and they struggled along, they limped along to the end of the year. I think they made a final, they lost the final. Grant Thomas was sacked. They both should have gone. There were other issues there, I know, but a football club, you just need to all be pulling
I
together.
agree with that
and
aspect.
they're
I'm not arguing with that aspect.
You
at
said
all.
yesterday they should get in a room and sort
Yes,
it out.
I do.
Somebody bigger than them needed to make this call, and it was weak that they didn't.
We are going to talk about the win in a sec. There's one more footnote to this, and that is Kevin Sheedy's role on the board, which is the other... This was another
Such
unusual...
an insult to Brad Scott, in my view.
One of their greatest names ever, Simon Madden, and former director, was asked about Kevin Sheedy's role on the board. This was a fascinating answer.
Should Kevin still be on the board?
Very good question. I'm not sure. You've got to give him a bit of leeway because when he answered that question about Hurdy, he was on Lindsay Fox's boat in the Mediterranean with a few reds under the belt, so he's allowed to say whatever he likes.
Oh, Simon, please. I mean, again, and I understand the statesman, the hero, the legend Kevin Sheedy is, but he made that statement, whether he'd had 10 reds or no reds, he should not be on the board when Brad Scott is there coaching. I mean, Brad Scott is a strong enough person to fight these battles on his own, I'm sure, but it's just insulting to him that he's still there.
Lordy, what about the list? Because are you concerned that there's a lot of talent on the list that may be wasted again?
Well, not anymore, because I think that I don't think they've been coached that well for a long time. And if Brad comes in, all I wanted to show was this list is underachieved, in my opinion. They're much better than they are. They've only had 3 or 4 All-Australians in a long, long time. Like, I'm talking maybe 10 years. So I wanted to show that, look at the top 13 draft picks where they're...
So you blame the development the way they've been coached?
Yeah, the development...
Rather than the way they've been picked?
Yeah. I think the development has been poor. The
Recruiters
environment
always
has been
blame
poor.
the developers and the developers blame the recruiters.
Every recruiter gets some right and some wrong. There's no
Of course they do.
in the game. But all I'm saying is McGrath's better than he has shown. I think Peter Wright was at the Gold Coast. How did he go there compared to Essendon? He's better. Perkins is a fantastic player. And then you've got Draper, Merritt, Shields, Martin, Stringer, Ridley, Tipper. There's a lot of talent, Hutchie. So I'm not giving them excuses. I'm actually saying they've underperformed for a long time and they should be looking to win 10,
like you've had a
11,
coffee.
12 games.
There was excitement generally around, quickly, Donald Tipper-Woody and the way he held him back to play on the last was good coaching for the fans. Davey was magnificent.
Great showmanship,
Perkins was
wasn't
great,
it?
as you mentioned. So there's some really nice things out of that win. There's low opposition.
Yeah, it's important not to get carried away with that.
But should they Gold Coast and St Kilda in the next 2 weeks? Should they nearly be favourites going into both of them?
Oh, clearly.
So, yeah.
And the coach does not need, in my view, one arm behind his back, which is what he's doing coaching at the moment.